Good afternoon and welcome to our third and final Reduce and Reuse Action Plan Midpoint Review webinar. Some of you may have joined us for our last two review webinars held on April 17th and May 6th this year. During the first meeting, we reviewed our actions to date for single-use food serviceware, textiles, and electronics. And then during last week's meeting, we covered bulky items. Today, our review is focused on building materials and deconstruction, topics about which we have already covered a lot of ground through our deconstruction work group meetings. So to mix things up and keep it a little bit interesting, we decided to couple today's review of the action plan with an update on what's currently happening in the deconstruction space to get us all up to date. So let's get started. Next slide, please. Deconstruction work group meetings are planned by our planning team, which represents industry, nonprofit organizations, and individuals from federal, state, and local government. Pictured here are the leaders and practitioners who bring their vision and experience to this work. The planning team, just as a note, it is evolving and growing at this time, so stay tuned for some updates in our next deconstruction working group meeting. There will be new faces on this slide. And I also want to, give a sincere thank you to the people who are on the slide who have been giving their time and expertise to our work group to keep this a vibrant network and help us keep apprised of everything that's going on. Next slide, please. Here's our agenda for today. As I mentioned, we have 90 minutes and we're going to keep things pretty tight. So we're going to start with a lightning round with speakers from across the state. The big picture will be presented by Kristen Fritsch. She'll provide a brief update on the Build Reuse Industry Report, which is hot off the press. Kevin Allen from the Mass Department of Conservation and Recreation, or DCR, which he will share about deconstruction and reuse of 2 barns at Spectacle Pond Farm. David Polanco from Turner Construction will share learnings from a recent suburban fit out. Andrew Thompson from Boston Building Resources will give an update on BBR's work in residential deconstruction and skill-based education for homeowners and renters and landlords. And then we'll have Barbara Bachelum from Sustainable Performance Institute give us a brief glimpse of the hackathon model she uses to support deconstruction with designers and contractors. Then we'll go into a Q&A for you to ask questions of the speakers. At the conclusion of the Q&A, we will get into the business of our midpoint review and feedback session related to the deconstruction components of the Reduce and Reuse Action Plan, and conclude with an update / introduction to the fall workshop we are planning and the next steps for the decon work group. Just a reminder of some of the goals of this work group. We're here to gain a better understanding of how much C&D material is being wasted in Massachusetts and to identify the opportunities for reuse, to help grow the reuse industry for building materials, align our work with the action plan, minimize climate impacts through better management of valuable resources that are already in circulation. And we aim to educate and share knowledge across all stakeholder groups as we explore a variety of topics. So also through this network, we're seeking efficient ways to connect materials in supply with those who want it, to identify local deconstruction practitioners, to learn about design for reuse and adaptive reuse, ways to earn lead points, and of course, an overarching goal to create effective deconstruction policies and ordinances. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce, thank you, our first speaker, Kristen Fritsch of Elkis Manfredi Architects. Again, a member of our planning team, and she's going to be providing a review of what we have called the big picture. So thank you, Kristen.
Hello, thank you for letting me share. So really quick, this was a session we had at Greenbuild. Greenbuild is an annual sustainability conference that draws a few thousand people every year in a different city. And this year, or I guess last year, in 2024, it was in Philadelphia. Boston usually has a really good group of attendees. And so we saw the opportunity, as many of us have been working on reuse in the AEC space for quite a while, saw the opportunities to gather a bunch of local, I guess, representatives as well as national, since we're all going to be in one spot. And we just wanted to look at how can Boston, we've got a lot of things going on in Boston. How can we leverage and pull together and kind of make some things happen? Next slide. So yeah, like I said, it was a 4-hour workshop. We held it outside of Greenbuild space. We couldn't quite get into their agenda, but were still able to get 42 or so attendees who represented a lot of different design firms, large contracting firms, local universities like MIT and Northeastern, and developers, as well as sustainability leads from large companies like Amazon. So it was quite interesting. Tables were organized to ensure diverse viewpoints and conversations. And we had 3 breakout sessions. Next slide. And so each of those sessions, well, I already talked about why focusing on Boston, but this is just a good slide to remind all of you, all the great things that are happening in our region, including this group, and many of you who are in some of these groups. Next slide. So the first session that we did was a breakout on visioning. What do you want material reuse to do for your organization? And we had each group, spend some time working together, kind of highlighting what they all thought, reuse could do for their organization, and then present to the group. So some of the themes that we saw come through were a profitable new business model. They saw it as, being a differentiator to their business, a value engineering opportunity for projects, and then of course, emissions reductions. Next slide. The second question to that section was, and what are the barriers to achieving reuse, right? So this is one of the typical sheets, what they look like. And these are some of the very common themes that came up, which we all know pretty well, right? Risk management. How do we get people to change their mindset, get beyond the shiny and new? Logistics, timing, who's responsible? Where does the products go? We all know the hurdles. Next slide. And then after that section, we let everyone get up, and we had around the room, we had a whole bunch of products on the wall. And we asked everyone to take some sticky notes and basically rate the products for their ability to be reused and make comments. So the results of that, we have a report coming out, and I was a little misleading. I thought we'd have the report done by now, but it's close. It's really close, and we'll distribute that when we get the final report. But this is an example of one of the products and the kind of summary issues that we saw, right? There's opportunities with the grid systems of the ceiling tiles, and of course the ceiling tiles themselves, but the challenges are what's listed here, concerns about old products, desire for EPDs of the reused product, and gathering the tiles themselves. If you go to the next slide, this is a summary of all the products that we have listed, where green is the feasibility, the reusability, basically, right? So we have furniture and doors up on top, and then ranked as you go down, where red is more of, more challenging. Next slide. So then the last breakout session we had for the afternoon was having these same groups of people take one of those products and then walk it through, from basically where they would find it on their project to reuse, right? So we had at each table, we had designers, building contractors, and an owner, and a mix of maybe a few other people, but they walked through these materials, and basically we all came up with a lot of questions, but you know, we asked them to, you know, what concerns would you have doing it? What when you're running it through the construction process, what are the, you know, hurdles, or what kind of things can the industry do to incentivize this? The next slide. So in summary, this is really hard to do in 5 minutes, but pro progress is possible, but needs to be collaborative. It was really awesome to have everybody in the room for this 4-hour work session. I think it helped all of us feel like we're not alone in this, and that we do all have similar, you know, we're on the right track. But we also realize that many of our efforts are siloed, and so, you know, trying to brainstorm what can bring us together, or what can make this more collaborative, was what we spent a lot of the conversation on. Next slide. So next steps, which is I think where we hope we'll have a document that comes out that kind of summarizes the summit, and then what we see as next steps. And this is just a couple of the things that I pulled out for this group. I think one of the biggest things that'll make a difference is, you know, figuring out what incentives will drive uptake on these reclaimed products. And then, you know, targeting the policy that helps pull the laggers along, right? There's a lot of people doing this at maybe a residential scale, but how do we scale this up and do this at the commercial scale? And what's going to meet, you know, move the needle on reuse locally. So we may have come into alignment through this 4-hour work session, but then we also left with a lot of questions that we'll need to address. That's all.
Thanks, Kristen. Next up, we've got Kevin Allen.
Okay, hi, thank you. So great to be here. My name is Kevin Allen. I'm with the Department of Conservation and Recreation. If you're all familiar, if you're not, that's our state parks and others, and lots of other stuff, agencies. So just joined this kind of group and very recently, and it was a great opportunity at the State Historic Preservation Conference to kind of to find out more, and presentation that Kathy and others made at the conference really spoke to us on what we were doing from the historic preservation side of things. So if we go to the next first slide, is just sorry, it's so busy. This is supposed to this is from an animated slideshow where everything was supposed to be out at once, but it'll keep me going and quickly here. So I'm with the senior planner with the Office of Cultural Resources, the element of DCR that manages all of our historic resources, which are pretty much we manage and steward more than, you know, easily than any other entity in the state, maybe in New England, in terms of buildings and landscapes and archaeological resources and everything in between. And I manage a group, a rehabilitation and reuse group that's kind of focused on buildings, on identifying our vacant historic buildings, of which we have hundreds, and trying to figure out what to do with them. So because of this, we're a big agency, again, 500,000 acres. Everyone has a DCR park that they go to or have been to or know of. We're everywhere. We're in all corners of the state, and we luckily have the resources to do a lot of acquisitions. That's purchasing land for the purpose of conserving it. Most of the time that does not come with buildings, but a lot of the time it does. So when that happens, we are then the steward of those buildings, and our mission is to preserve and protect the natural, cultural, and recreational resources of the Commonwealth. So now we have to figure out what to do with those. Unfortunately, because of this, we do a lot of demolitions, and I've been involved for every, maybe 2 properties we've been able to save. We demolish 1 kind of on that ratio, and I've watched that happen. Of course, that happening is kind of the failure of myself as a preservationist and a cultural resource planner. But it's definitely, it's part of the process. But through that, we've seen too many of these. Is see the strip above. It's just a little gallery of our in memoriam gallery of some of our great buildings. But in watching this happen, we've always tried and thought, well, we really don't want to lose some of these materials, and we've tried kind of in little parts and pieces to try to, when we do a demo, to try to pull some material aside. But as we know, they're really on the small picture and the big picture. The whole deconstruction process is complicated, and we didn't really have anything in process or any process for managing that really. So we lose these historic buildings, and we also have lost a lot of the historic material. Same problems as we're all running into with deconstruction on a different scale. So we again introduced to this group and started thinking more about a process-oriented way of looking at our deconstruction. So I'm coming at it from hopefully a slightly unique perspective of being a state agent, being part of a state agency, and with a focus really on historic properties. That's what our goal is. Losing them, demolishing them is a loss and something we're trying to avoid. But the goal, our kind of motivating factor is that, as long as also being part of the a secretariat that's obviously concerned about climate change and impacts on climate change. So the carbon savings and the material cost savings also. We don't have unlimited resources to be like preserving and stabilizing our historic buildings. So those are costs that are lost in materials as well. And of course, the same concept is, we have costs for demolishing and putting materials into the waste stream, which are something we're trying to avoid as well. So just next slide, please. So we looked to do a pilot, kind of call it a pilot. There's a property I've been working on for a long time out in Western Mass in the Otis State Forest, the Spectacle Pond section, which is in Sanesfield, all the way out in the far southwest corner of the state. And we had a big multi-building complex there, 6 plus historic structures dating from the late 18th, early 19th century. We put it through every possible investment, capital program, stabilization, partnership, outside leasing program. We basically tried every option we had, every preservation option we had at the agency. But the condition of these, when we acquired them as part of a bigger acquisition, 800-acre acquisition in the 90s, was just too bad. The condition was too far gone. You see the building down in the lower left corner as an example of kind of what we're looking at. So despite the significance of this complex and the really unique collection of buildings, we had to unfortunately make the determination to demolish the buildings because they've become safety hazards on top of just the aesthetic issues. So there's really, so the one part of this, the upside is that the building you see on the left and right at the bottom is a slaughterhouse. It was kind of the most unique resource that we had. It's the only one we really know of in Massachusetts and then Southern New England, early 19th century slaughterhouse. We were able to preserve that as part of the demo process. And in the process, we reused about 70% of the new material we used for the rehab came from the other buildings on site. So that's kind of the motivator, and to see like in practice, okay, we can take these materials and we can use them on our other projects. So let's do this more in a more systematic way. So DEP put us connect us with Recycle Works and some great consultants there were able to help us to kind of look at this in a different way. The other buildings, the barn you see there in the images above are really the only one we can probably salvage, but it's a big 100-foot barn, and there's hundreds of timbers that we're going to look to salvage and rehab. So, or to salvage and reuse. So next slide, and that's my last one. So I think I'm on pace here. So again, same problems we have with all deconstruction projects. We have different ones here because we're, our goal is to really deconstruct the reusable, valuable historic materials, all of which is old, most of which is old growth and just unavailable really from an affordable standpoint on the market anywhere. And so the idea is we want to take it down. We need to figure out how to do that. It's a different process than our usual demo contractors deal with. And so we've worked, again, by working with some of the consultants to get some ideas. We're hopefully going to partner with our historic preservation corps. It's an AmeriCorps crew that also wants to kind of learn about this process as a kind of a workforce development skill to learn about the deconstruction process. It's then, storing it, milling it down also is another part of the cycle here that we're looking at, our specific cycle. And then just the cost, what's going to subsidize the additional cost it's going to take to do all this. So we're able to kind of make a case. We had a agency-wide kind of there's a little extra money left over, a little incentive grant for some innovative ideas. We put this idea forward, and out of 50 some odd ideas throughout DCR, ours was kind of the highest ranking, I think, because we hit on just so many agency priorities. And so we're going to try to use some of that funding for the storage element of this to try to rehab a barn that's in not quite as bad a condition as the others in Central Mass, with the idea that now we have the materials that could also rehab that, and now we can use it for a storage space for the material we get from all of our other demolitions and all our other projects statewide to put it in kind of a central repository. So we appreciate the momentum. We're happy to be part of this. We're hoping that the rest of that EEA, the rest of our secretariat kind of sees this and all the great work that's going on, and that we can kind of address the regulatory side of this and look at other state agencies to hopefully kind of follow the lead. We're hoping to have a successful, get through this cycle by this time next year and have a better a presentation to kind of show a success story. That's that's all I've got. Thank you for your thanks for your interest in this, and hopefully any questions we can grab later.
Thanks, Kevin. I do look forward to the update on that project. So representing the business sector is David Polanco from Turner Construction, who will share some of the lessons learned from a recent suburban fit out. Thank you, David.
Thank you. You could go to the first slide. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. My name is David Polanco, Special Projects Division Project Manager for Turner Construction. And I want to talk about a deconstruction, reuse / take back case study and some of the lessons that we learned along the way. So a quick project description. So 4,000 square foot partial floor renovation of an existing space to accommodate another group coming in from a separate building. This included a few small conference rooms, a lounge, a break room, an AI theater, and an IT and AV support room. What was actually interesting about this project and the perfect opportunity for this case study was that we were mimicking the existing space and bringing it over. So there was a lot of materials that could be reused. And what was great is this inherently allowed us to have the reuse location as opposed to deconstructing and finding a place for it. So definitely good in that aspect. Next slide. Okay, so before I jump into this, I do want to mention that we started with an open space capture. And if you're not familiar with that, it's kind of like a Google Maps. It's a 3D camera that walks around the space and creates a shareable file that we sent to all of our reuse partners. So you'll see in the top right corner, we have a legend. So green presented an easy success, no challenges. Yellow was small challenges, but still successful. And then orange presented major challenges and were not successful. Demountable doors and frames, this was easy. There were small challenges with the demountable glass, but luckily we had a flexible owner and design team. And you can't really tell in this photo, but an example of that is those two yellow highlights. Those glasses are actually 1 inch apart in size. So, normally that could be a big deal for an architect or a design team or an owner. But because we had the conversation early, we had a good relationship established. You know, they were involved with this effort and on board. So that was a huge help. And every project is going to have its unique challenges. The big challenge that we faced was storage, and I think Kevin kind of touched on that a little bit, and so did Kristen. You know, we didn't have a lot of real estate on the project site, so we had to move the space around. We had to move the materials around a little bit and protect it while we were doing construction. But all in all, it was worth it because it eliminated lead time issues and we saved on material costs. Next slide. Okay, some more easy success. Furniture and AV equipment. These were owner-directed scopes. The credenza, the credenzas that you see here, we actually worked with the design team on this as well, and we resized the walls to conceal those. The carpet tile, we actually, for the new carpet tile, we were able to reuse attic stock in the existing tile. We actually took advantage of Shaw's take back program. The challenge here again was with storage. So we had to store this material, the carpet tile, before while we waited for the manufacturer to take it off site. So again, it's important to coordinate with your manufacturers early to avoid congestion in your work site. Next slide. Okay, a little more mixed success now. So gyp cutoffs, if you're not familiar with that, that's basically drywall. This should be done on any construction project, as clean drywall is a waistband product. Small challenge with this was storing it. We had a lot of buggies full or hampers full of these on the site. Fabric panels, these were a challenge for reuse. One, it was a small quantity of material, and two, it had existing cuts, so it was really specific to the existing space. So finding a source for that was difficult. And then the existing wood ceiling, we really wanted this one to work out, but unfortunately, it was not cost effective. And during our VE process, this was the first thing eliminated. Next slide. Okay, so here I'll start with the easy items. Sound masking. We got creative with this one. Instead of adding a new system as designed, we actually reconfigured the existing speakers to accommodate the new layout. So that saved on bringing in more materials, and it was mostly just labor. Lighting. I'll say lighting was a major challenge in the moment. This was hard on our electricians, especially in the field. There was a lot of troubleshooting and swapping out parts to make things work, as well as dealing with compatibility with the existing system that it was tying into. But looking back on it, it was actually pretty successful. 100% of the lights that were installed were actually reused. The only exception to that was the 2x2 lights that we put into the abandoned space that we left for safety. Next slide. Okay. So here I want to talk about back of house spaces. So these are spaces that aren't customer facing. This is a great opportunity for reuse. Owners not as worried about matching existing finishes. You'll see in the photos here, the cabinet and that shelving came from the old space, and it wasn't perfect, and it didn't match the rest of the new space, but owner knew it was going to be covered with equipment, as you can see here, so it's not as critical for this to match. So that worked out well. The HVAC units, we had 3 existing units that were brought in from the previous space. The actual work in moving it over to the new space was straightforward and easy. The downside, and I guess why it's yellow, is because now you don't have a warranty on salvage HVAC equipment. So it's something you want to communicate with your owners. And then the last thing I want to touch on here is you'll see in the photos that blue wall. On paper, it made sense to reuse an existing door and frame that we had, but when we walked the space with the owner, they wanted to keep a consistent look with that wall and keep everything flat. So there was another door that we had to match there. So that didn't work out. And the lesson learned there is don't just look at these items in plan, you know, do your open space, walk the space with your owner. Next slide. And last thing I want to say here is for any sustainability initiatives for Turner. Actually, I'm out of time, but thank you everybody for your time. I appreciate you having me here.
Thanks, David. Next up, we're going to have Andrew Thompson representing deconstruction in the residential sector.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. I represent Boston Building Resources. We are a nonprofit organization in Roxbury Crossing focused on building material reuse and education. Next slide, please. We've been in Roxbury since 1993. We have a building material reuse center, so a store where we sell things. We also have like a whole range of educational workshops, both of which I'll be talking about a little bit. We have something around 5,000 unique individuals who interact with us every year between customers, donors, workshop attendees. Our community is just about anybody who's interested in material reuse, learning about building trades or bargains. So you're talking to homeowners, renters, contractors, designers, etc. Our store is open to the public. We really prioritize access and affordability. So we operate with an income qualified discount program. So the public is welcome to shop at cheap prices. And if you are income qualified, you shop at a significantly cheaper price. So our goal is to get the stuff in and get it out as fast as we can. And our workshops have the same pricing structure and are centered around sort of all aspects of reuse. There's home improvement skills, there's art making and creative reuse, and sort of general skills and educational stuff. So next slide, please. So this is a little bit of what we look like. We've got some workshop photos. We've got some store photos. It can be a little bit of a learning curve for folks who are not familiar with the reuse center, but my 9-year-old calls it a Goodwill Home Depot. So that's about the easiest way to think about it, I find. Next slide, please. So in addition to our sort of store and education offerings, we see ourselves as a community resource. We have networking events. We are deepening a partnership with the Boston Architectural College, where we're talking to their student body about reuse, deconstruction, all the things that we would like the architects of tomorrow to be conscious of and thinking about. And we have a really active volunteer group who, in addition to being joyful and helpful, help us a lot on the deconstruction front. Students, community members, and organizations are all part of our volunteer group. Next slide, please. So deconstruction. We have been doing residential deconstruction projects for, I suppose, a little over a year. We operate all of them with internal resources and volunteers. So I was a builder in a past life before I came here. We have some other folks like that on staff. And we have a lot of staff folks who are interested in learning skills. So it's sort of a great cross-section of what can be achieved with deconstruction. You've got sort of people interested in it from sort of a conscious reuse side. You got people who want to use it as a learning process. Next slide, please. So we focus primarily on stuff that we can sell in our building. To everyone else's point, storage is a problem. We also have the added problem of market development. So we focus on deconstructing things that we think we can turn around and move pretty quickly through our reuse center or give it to other nonprofit organizations. In the residential sphere, It's primarily the things listed below. We are also doing quite a bit of sort of consulting around deconstruction. So aside from doing the work ourselves, we are talking to people who are interested in the process, interested in understanding it, and sort of adding our expertise and assistance to those processes. Next slide, please. So this is some of the projects we've had. Functionally in the residential sphere, a lot of what happens is kitchen remodels and bathroom remodels. So kitchen cabinets are a great place to start with deconstruction. There's a tremendous amount of embodied carbon. They're pretty easy to take apart, and our customers are always happy to see them. So cabinets, appliances, those are pretty big items for us. Next slide, please. Here's some more. So these are all different unique projects we've had. We aim to be a super affordable solution. So as a nonprofit, we are not interested in making this profitable. And candidly, we're not convinced that in the absence of legislation, it will become profitable. It's often a thing that people do because it's a cheap solution, or it's a thing that they are invested in doing from a sustainability perspective. So we find that our best bet is to be cheaper than a demolition company, to be professional, to be on time, to be clean, and to help builders talk to their clients about why this is the best thing for their project. So it doesn't hurt anybody's project timeline. It's an incidental item in a project budget. The money folks pay for it goes directly to support a nonprofit that does all sorts of great community work, and the materials are made available to someone else, often people who need them. Most of our customers are folks working on pretty low incomes, trying to maintain their properties. Next slide, please. This was a great project. We had, it was a rare project. We had a homeowner who was doing a whole house demolition who found us and wanted us to sort of use it as a bit of an experiment. So anything that we thought we could deconstruct and take away was something that we were able to deconstruct and take away. So we had a great group of volunteers go up there. We posted up for about a week. That's our donation truck down there. We pulled all of this great Trex decking. We got a bunch of good flooring, kitchens, sinks, all that kind of good stuff. We find that flooring is often complex to deconstruct and reuse. Sort of to David's point, a lot of that stuff winds up being more expensive to remove and cheaper to buy new. So there does seem to be an inflection point budget-wise when you get into certain kinds of materials. But this was a great project where we were able to really try all sorts of different stuff. Next slide, please. More kitchens, more doors, all the great work of our staff. Next slide, please. Yeah, here's that flooring wrapped up. Here's we got like a dozen doors out of this place. And so all of this stuff gets put in our truck and driven down to Roxbury, and it flies off the shelves. We'll sell things for, that door is probably less than $50. We're really sort of trying to be a resource for our community. Next slide, please. So this is us. That is our truck on the left. That is our store on the right. If you're interested in any of our program, you can find us there. You can find my contact information on the next slide. Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you for participating. Really appreciate it. Our last speaker representing the design sector is Barbara Bachelon from Sustainable Performance Institute, who will be explaining hackathons. And I am going to put a link in the chat right now that she provided so that you guys can get to the Miro board she's going to be talking about.
Great, thank you. And apologies if I'm hard to hear. I'll do my best. So I'm a recovering architect and I wear 4 hats. I'm going to focus on the Decon Hackathon today, but just for a little background, Sustainable Performance Institute does a lot of work with policy and institutional-wide change management. And the other hat I wear is Building Ease, which is a free tool for everything related to materials and products, including reuse, which hopefully you'll all be using soon. building these as a scale engine for change, there are a few things that relate to this. One is the reuse and take back aggregation. So when you have small quantities, that enables grouping them together. But because we work directly with manufacturers, we're pushing them to circularize their products using fasteners instead of glues, having QR codes on the back so labor knows they can scan with their phone what to do with it, and promoting new products like Juno, which is instead of building walls in offices, they're demountable completely and they take that all back if you don't reuse them. And then our programs. So crowdsource collabs and decon hackathons are two big ones. The Decon Hackathon is what you'll see if you go to the link in the Miro board, and I encourage anyone and everyone to use that and add to it asynchronously, like on your own time. One of the reason why we started doing these Decon hackathons, and for anyone who doesn't know, oops, I forgot to start my timer. For anyone who doesn't know, hackathons are, come from software, and it's basically group problem solving. So one of the bottlenecks among many for the whole reuse initiative is that if designers are not designing structures, assemblies, so that they can be taken apart, then it makes it much harder for Turner and for Andrew and anyone else to make those useful. Now, why don't they just do that, you might ask? Well, no one's paying them to do that, and anything that comes out of overhead or on their own time is kind of a thing that doesn't exist, having time. So it's also a question of why should every firm repeat the same work unnecessarily? If everyone's trying to figure out how to make a specific assembly deconstructible, then they're all repeating that work. And we are big believers in collaboration as a way to move farther, faster together. So that, coupled with the fact that no one's actually going to revise their standard details, even if they have them, to be deconstructible, then the best thing would be to have a decon hackathon. So we've had 4 of these. We're going to do a lot more. And when you go on the Miro board, you'll be able to see that the instructions are to take a particular kind of assembly, and we have preset a number of ones that we knew just from experience were important, whether it's exterior things like parking garages or MEP equipment or interior partitions. There are different scenarios that require different design solutions. So the hackathon event is where designers, contractors, policy people from all over everywhere come together. They look at kind of the original, here's what the status quo is, here's how we usually design and build these things. And then how can we change that so that it's much easier to be deconstructed? The solution needs to really take into account not just the design of how to put those pieces together, but the constructability and deconstructability. So having construction in the hackathons has been really critical. Having owners there so they understand the process, both from, assessing through walkthrough what's reusable and what isn't, but also understanding that it's a design imperative. So for designers who aren't leaning that way, the owners need to actually give that direction and make that request to people. So when we do the hackathons, we set it up as a choose your own adventure. So depending on what you're interested in, if you're an interior designer, then obviously you're going to gravitate towards one of the interior solutions. We had Arup's London office focus on parking garages because there's one global tech company whose founder and CEO hates having to build parking garages, but is required to, obviously. So he wants them to be basically things that can be taken apart. It's lovely, optimistic, and very complex, but Arup was up to the challenge. So they've been working on that. And Francis Yang has been leading those efforts here in the US for a long time. So the point of the hackathons is to create a public library of these details that any owner or designer can take, bring back to their firms, adopt and adapt. We take no liability about the, structural, et cetera, of these things, big disclaimers, legal on here, but it's meant to be a public library that anyone from anywhere can take from, and then we can proliferate standard details that are decon friendly rather than ones that make it harder for all of us to do our jobs. And that's it.
Great, thank you. Right on time, amazing. So we're going through the questions section. I saw a couple questions in the Q&A. We don't have a lot of time. A question from Kristen to David. Maybe Kristen, just say it out loud and then it might go faster.
Yeah, David, we're just curious on your reuse project with the fabric panels and the wood ceiling. You mentioned a little bit about why the fabric panels weren't as easily reusable, but the wood ceiling, was that because it was mechanically, or it wasn't mechanically installed? Was it glued? Or what
No,
was
it wasn't glued. I think the big thing is just labor cost, right? Now you're using carpenters to demo it versus laborers. And then on the install, you have existing cutouts for your lighting or whatever devices you have in the ceiling. So now you're trying to relay it out in the new space. So when you compare it to doing an ACT ceiling, the cost is night and day.
Thanks.
I actually had a question for BBR. Do you guys do outreach to residential architects and do training for contractors in the residential market as part of your programming?
Yeah, we do some outreach to residential contractors. We ought to be doing more. As far as trainings, it's interesting. We have sort of come to the conclusion that there's like not a ton of special sauce in the mechanics of deconstruction. Like most people that we talk to who are builders have built a building and they know how to take it apart. The question comes often down to like, what do you do with all the stuff? What's the stuff that's worth deconstructing? What's the stuff that isn't? What's the stuff that there's a market for? What are the end uses for all this stuff? And that's sort of why I mentioned we've like been doing more consulting lately instead of just going in and doing projects ourselves, because there are teams of experts all over the place who are interested in this work, and their questions are sort of like logistical and conceptual, and not so much mechanical. Because if you can hang cabinets, you can take cabinets down, but then what the heck do you do with them? Who are the interested parties? That kind of thing is the trick. So we find. But yes, outreach, more outreach, always more outreach, never enough outreach.
Never enough.
Never.
So actually, speaking of that, I had a question and I don't know if you can answer this, but so let's say I'm a homeowner and I'm looking for a vanity. And I've gone to your shop and I really want to buy one, but there aren't any in stock. Do you have like a method for people to request an alert if they are looking for something that they would like to buy secondhand?
Not currently. It's a thing that we're working on. So we are entering the wide world of a Shopify-enabled website, which is pretty exciting stuff for us. It will allow people to like interact with our inventory online, and we are like looking into tools that would do just that sort of thing you're talking about. Because we like our big challenge as BBR is not stuff. There's an endless amount of this stuff out there. There's a lot of people who are willing to donate it. The question is, who's going to buy it, and what's that market look like? And in the world of like Home Depots and Amazons, people want to know exactly what they're after. So the better we can be about making that process easier, then the happier customers will be.
I know I would be.
Yeah, me too.
I was asking for a friend. So I'm going to hand it over to Leah, who's going to take over from now on. We're going to get into the real good business of today.
Okay, can everyone see my screen again?
Yep.
Perfect. All right, thanks Janice, and thanks everyone who's spoken already. It's great to have so many different faces here. Now we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about the review and assessment of MassDEP's Reduce and Reuse Action Plan. And if you can believe it, it's already been 3.5 years since the plan was released. So it's time to do a midpoint review. And as Janice mentioned, this is the last of 3 meetings. Each have focused on a different priority material that's laid out in the plan. And our goal with the meetings is to give you a status update of what's been accomplished so far, what's ongoing, and what we haven't started yet. And then we're looking to get your feedback so we can make sure we're not missing anything as we continue to move forward with this work. We really just want to know if we're still on the right track. But before we jump into that, we thought it would be helpful to give a quick high-level overview of the action plan and how it came to be. So if you've tuned into the last 2 R&R meetings, the first couple slides I'm going to get into are going to be a repeat. So if you want to step away for a second, have some coffee, have a snack, please do. The plan can be found on our website. Janice is going to drop a link to it in the chat so you can open it up and follow along if you'd like. So some of you probably know that we have a statewide solid waste master plan, which sets 2 big goals: reduce waste disposal statewide by 30% over the next decade, and then the long-term goal of achieving 90% waste reduction by 2050. You can see those goals, a depiction of them in the lower right-hand corner of the slide. There's a lot that's in the solid waste master plan, of course. It's not just about reuse, but reuse is certainly part of it. And the plan acknowledges that to reach our high-level waste goals, we need to reduce waste at the source, we need to reuse, repair, we need to do all those R's that prevent waste from being created in the first place. And so with that in mind, I created a reduce and reuse action plan. And from that, or to build that, MassDEP formed a reduce and reuse working group that began meeting in 2020. And over a series of meetings, MassDEP collected feedback from that group on barriers to reuse and repair in mass, many of which we've already heard about today in terms of deconstruction. And then we also collected ideas for opportunities to overcome those barriers and really grow our reuse ecosystem in state. As you can imagine, there were a lot of ideas that emerged over those meetings. And MassDEP, we collected them, we translated them into actions that were then categorized into higher level strategies. All of that whole process culminated in the action plan itself, which was published in December 2020. I also want to just quickly note that the deconstruction work group, this group we're in right now, it's a subgroup of this larger reduce and reuse working group. So there are quite a few priority materials identified in the action plan. They were first identified in the solid waste master plan, and they're considered priority because they have significant diversion potential. They can reduce waste by phasing out materials that are hard to recycle. They have strong potential for increased reuse and donation, and there are local markets for them in mass that that exist, but are either underutilized or have a lot of development potential. For this conversation, of course, we're focusing on building materials and then, of course, deconstruction that allows us to have those reused building materials. Okay, so on the left, we have the barriers to reuse and repair that those stakeholders I mentioned identified in those early meetings, and they're really what the action plan is working to address. They're cultural, so consumers might lack knowledge, attitudes, or behaviors that would support greater adoption of reuse and repair in mass. Access, so is there sufficient access to and convenience to reuse and repair options? Infrastructure, reuse and repair organizations might need greater support to maintain and grow their capacity. Policy, Local, state, and federal policies might inhibit reuse and repair at times. And then markets. Market trends and product design don't always align with waste prevention and reuse goals, as Andrew mentioned a little bit earlier. And then on the right, we have the key strategies that are working to address these barriers. These are the methods by which we could help grow, improve, and normalize reuse in mass. And we'll be going over each of these strategies as they relate to our work in deconstruction in a few slides, but we wanted to introduce them all together here. I'm not going to walk through all of them, but you'll see them come up again in a second. I also wanted to just give a quick reminder of what's within our purview. As MassDEP, we provide grants and financial incentives, we give technical assistance, education and outreach, and then of course we help build networks like we're doing with this group today. And really our work is designed to support all of you. We know that the reuse ecosystem and growing it in mass requires an all hands on deck approach across many different sectors. The action plan also maps out ways we can measure progress. And of course, we can track reuse efforts related to deconstruction, whether that's like tonnage of materials diverted or the amount of material sold for reuse. And we know that from a greenhouse gas perspective, the upstream impacts of creating and transporting new products contributes a lot to climate impacts. So reusing materials can really be a game changer, especially as we start to scale up systems and programs en masse, many of the programs and people that we heard from today, including others. And then from a downstream perspective, we're continuing to track the adoption and impact of reuse activities across mass over time. So that can include the number of grants requested and the amount of money awarded to them. We've got several grant opportunities that really try to catalyze action on the municipal, nonprofit, commercial levels. And we're happy to report that we've seen an uptick in applications and awards specifically supporting reuse, including deconstruction, and those have grown substantially over the last few years. Really exciting stuff. And then we compare this tracking with our waste characterization data. That's the tonnage of waste sent for disposal in state, so that we can try to quantify the amount of waste avoided through source reduction and reuse. And of course, it's not a perfect calculation, but it can help us paint a picture of what's going on in mass. And yeah, it's a work in progress. But let's dive into the details. So everything on the next few slides comes directly from the action plan. And if you look at the first row in this table, you'll see strategies that I mentioned a couple slides back. You'll see the action itself within that strategy, and then status and examples of things that we are currently doing or have already done. And you're going to see these same headers on the next few slides. Again, our goal is to give you a status update on actions specifically related to building material reuse, and then we'll hear from you. Are we on the right track? The first strategy we're looking at is education and behavior change. You'll see that there are 2 actions under this strategy that relate to building materials. The first is to create or promote an online calculator that quantifies the environmental, social, and economic benefits of reuse. This is something that's come up in many of the deconstruction meetings that we've been in, meetings we've held, especially for municipalities who are looking into ordinances and bylaws that require a demo delay or some level of deconstruction. And so we haven't created this tool yet, but it's certainly something that's on our radar. And we're looking out for other similar tools that have been created in other places. The other action is to develop a statewide education campaign around best practices for reducing waste, increasing reuse and repair, and of course, extending the lifespan of our products. Some of you might be familiar with our statewide education initiative called Recycle Smart MA. That initiative, we help mass residents understand what they should do with their waste. And in terms of building material reuse, We've made several social media posts that celebrate the work of local organizations like Habitat for Humanity, who deal with used building materials. And then we also have a newsletter all about deconstruction in the works. So stay tuned for that, and really just trying to get it top of mind for residents across Mass. But then also, like, you know, people might not even know that what deconstruction is if you're an average person. So we want people to know and be thinking about it and advocating for it. We also have a few things listed under tools, resources, and technical assistance, all of which are ongoing. The first is to expand resources like project planning and materials management guidelines that help optimize reuse in construction projects, whether it's full-on deconstruction, renovations, new builds, you name it. We want to give a diverse array of guidance. And Recycling Works and MA actually already provides resources and technical assistance specifically for commercial and institutional deconstruction projects. They have a great webpage, which is linked here, and you'll get the slides after this meeting. And there's a ton of resources on that webpage, from a sample waste management plan and building specs to a list of local reuse outlets for salvaged building materials. So there's already a lot of great stuff happening there. Definitely go check it out if you haven't already. We're also planning an in-person workshop for the fall that will hopefully help inform new tools and resources that are needed in Mass to move the needle. And this might include, probably will include, model ordinances to be shared with other municipalities. And you can actually see that that's the second action here. It's specifically stating historic preservation, but we're gonna go beyond that and look at ordinances in general. And Barbara will speak to this more at the end of our presentation today. And then, of course, we also have our deconstruction work group meeting archive, which is a great resource. You can look back on these meetings, you can listen to recordings, get slide decks, and see what's going on in the deconstruction space in Mass. For grants and financial incentives, we have several programs that support building material reuse. We've got our Reduce, Reuse, Repair micro grants, which I manage. They're smaller grants, $3,000 to $10,000. Actually, in our last round, one of our grantees, Carey Company, was awarded $3,500 for a residential deconstruction pilot in Nantucket. And we welcome applications related to building material reuse and deconstruction for those grants. The guidelines for those grants actually include a couple project ideas that are specific to decon. We also have our recycling and reuse business development grants. The next round will go live this fall, and construction and demo materials are one of the targeted waste streams for reuse and recycling. These grants are larger, $50,000 to $400,000, and they can be used for processing, manufacturing, and reuse activities. For municipalities, we have our Sustainable Materials Recovery Program, or SMRP. Within that, there's our waste reduction grants, which can support larger municipal projects, or a municipality can apply in partnership with a business or nonprofit who wants to implement a deconstruction related activity. That could be, a deconstruction training. It could be building a material reuse center, hosting resident repair workshops, you name it. We haven't received any applications for those types of projects yet, but again, we definitely welcome them. And then the second action here is to promote residential deconstruction to increase the donation and reuse of building materials. This is something that's also supported currently by Recycling Works, but there's certainly a lot of grant opportunities and room for growth here. It's something that the microgrants could support and something we're continuing to think about as we expand our efforts. And then finally, within SMRP, we have our recycling dividends program. So again, for municipalities, and it incentivizes them to implement best practices in waste reduction by gaining points for things that they're already doing. So there weren't any points awarded for deconstruction in last year, the previous grant cycle. But in previous cycles, City of Boston actually earned points for a deconstruction pilot at Simmons University. And grant dollars earned through this RDP program can also be used to support deconstruction at the local level. So they get municipalities get grant dollars, and then they can spend that toward deconstruction. Our next strategy is job training and workforce development. There really hasn't been any action on our part here to report. When we get to the feedback section of this meeting, which hopefully if I continue at a fast clip, we'll get there. We'd love to hear from you about this strategy and the actions listed here. Per the action plan, MassDEP will seek to identify existing programs that could provide training resources and opportunities. Please let us know if you know of any good partners in this effort. We're on the lookout. And then for legislation, policies, regulations, and ordinances, this is another area we haven't really started to work on yet. Again, we welcome your ideas and knowledge, and that's something that we're going to dive into more in the fall in-person workshop. With regards to networking, we do a lot of different things. We facilitate information sharing and network opportunities amongst stakeholders, including all of you and others. And then, of course, we have our reduce and reuse meetings along with our deconstruction meetings with this group. We also host a reduce and reuse listserv that lets participants share and connect. It's been a little quiet these days, so we definitely want to jazz that up, get people energized and sharing resources in that place. And then, of course, we're working to develop partnerships that support reuse and reuse of building materials within the subgroup, trying to connect people. And Recycling Works provides networking opportunities through summits that they hold and content on their website. At this point, we have a whole robust network of stakeholders in the deconstruction space, and we've held several meetings to date. Here they are. I'm not going to walk through all of these because there's, of course, a lot here. But like I mentioned, these live on our archive page, and we can put a link in the chat if there isn't one already. But we have done a lot of different topics over the last couple of years. And all of this work, got to give a special shout out to our planning team. You saw all their lovely faces earlier in the presentation. They help guide us through all the different facets of deconstruction. And so far we've had 7 webinars with 100 to 150 participants in each, all representing different stakeholders working in the space, whether it's governments, folks from the construction industry, historic preservation planners, really a lot of the people that you see today presenting. We are really grateful for all the folks that show up. And, you know, through these meetings, we've heard about all the different opportunities and challenges to expanding this work in Mass. And given all that we've learned, we're really excited to move into the next phase of this whole process, which again, Barbara will be talking about in a second. Last but not least, we've got procurement. So we have been working to identify, look at the state's procurement office and their program for environmentally preferable products, which drive demand for durable goods at the state and local level. The Mass Operational Services Division, or OSD, is the state's procurement oversight agency, and they're charged with designing and implementing sustainable procurement policies and practices for all state agencies. And actually, municipalities have the opportunity to tap into these resources to support their own local purchases. So it's not just at the state level, it trickles down to the local level too. And we're continuing to work with OSD to better understand, share opportunities related to the acquisition of greener building and infrastructure materials like low carbon concrete. And this is really continuing to be an emerging opportunity. And, you know, Mass is a state partner in the federal Buy Clean initiative. So there's motivation there. And with respect to reuse and the disposition of used materials, OSD oversees the state's surplus property program, which enables reuse of office equipment, furniture, building materials, and more. Okay, I was talking fast. That was a lot, but hopefully that gave a good overview of what's in the plan, what's specific to deconstruction, the status of our work so far, and we're ready to open it up for discussion and take your questions and feedback.
We have about 10 minutes to work through the discussion. If there is any, please feel free to raise your hand. And if you have feedback to share, just let us know where you work, what you do, and feel free to add your feedback. I just want to also acknowledge someone asked if they could access the previous 2 DEP webinars on this subject. I'm not sure if they meant like deconstruction specifically or the reduce and reuse review. So if you mean deconstruction, yes, those ones are up there. But the reviews, I think we have the April 17th webinar up on that same link, but the one from last Tuesday, we're going to probably put it up with this one just to save some labor time. So probably next week we'll have the May 6th and today's the 13th meeting up there.
And we'll send a follow-up email too with those materials so you can be on the lookout in your inbox.
Yeah, anybody who registered for last Tuesday's meeting will get an email, and I think you usually send a link with the webinar recording is on from YouTube as well. Yeah, so we can provide that.
We do have a couple of prompts if
Ooh, good, yeah, do it.
folks.
Oh,
And Kathy says, how are we doing? Are we missing anything? That's just sort of general prompts. Caroline, do you want to chime in?
Just on the, I get the emails about the grant, this grant coming up, blah, blah, apply for this grant. Is there one place where they're all listed?
That's a really good question. Yeah.
I just put in the chat that put them all there.
Oh, perfect. Thanks,
Oh,
Kathy.
wow. I think you can sign off early if you want. Thank you.
Oh, sweet. All right. Perfect. Well, I'm curious, given all the stuff that I just walked through in the plan, and given the earlier conversations from the different speakers, is there anything that's standing out to folks as missing? Whether it's grants and technical assistance, whether it's outreach, networking. Yeah, Barbara?
I think one of the things that, well, may not have a home for it yet is the issue of the storage swing space. That's pervasive for everyone. And yeah, enough said.
Just wondering on the list, one of the last things you talked about was seeking out a workforce development partner. So can you talk about just all about what that looks like? Like who would they be partnering with? Is it identifying someone partnering with someone else or with DEP? What kind of, because I may have some ideas for that, but I'm just wondering what you're thinking in terms of how they would be a partner for you all.
Leah, do you want me to start?
Sure.
So I think we don't have a good idea yet, but I think the part of it is like vocational schools and finding out through these networks where these opportunities are, and then MassDEP can amplify those opportunities and maybe provide grants to like support them, but we wouldn't be the ones, you know, providing the training. We're just like looking to to connect the dots between here's the training, here are people that are doing this work, what training do they need to get more people, stuff like that. Kathy's nodding, so I think that's mostly right. And then she wrote, workforce development partners are there entities that we can connect with that may be a good fit to connect with deconstruction work. That's a prompt to you all. Andrew, do you have an answer?
Yes, I have a few.
Good.
I mean, you know, so because of where we are in Roxbury and because of sort of our sort of role in the community as like a sort of friendly neighborhood nonprofit where people come to learn stuff and shop and hang out and talk. Like I talk to a lot of folks in schools. I talk to a lot of small contractors. I talk to a lot of people sort of interested in workforce development. And I've had sort of sunk a lot of time into this idea of deconstruction workforce development. And the problem I keep coming back to is, you know, a lot of these programs want to put through 2 or 3 cohorts of students in a year, you know, 12 to 15 students a pop. There just doesn't seem to be enough demand for deconstruction work anywhere to keep enough people that busy. And so that's the problem I think about is like, you know, how would we pair a workforce development program? Because I'm like a strong believer in how it's a great platform, not only for deconstruction work, but for like a basic entry into the building trades, right? If you can take something apart, you can put it back together. But I just don't know how we figure out how to put enough work together to keep that many people busy and to make a program really worthwhile. And the minute I figure that out, I will start a dozen of them because I think it's the best thing going. But you know, if anyone's got any bright ideas, like that seems to be the rub is where's all that work coming from in the absence of some kind of legislative push to make people think about it.
I know it's like the perpetual chicken versus egg thing with this, especially with decon. I think with all of our reuse efforts, like if you don't have a labor force, you don't need the training. But if you don't have the training, you don't have the labor force. And if you don't have a market for that stuff and people who want to put it in, then you have a glut of stuff and you don't have any place to put it. And like, okay, but if there's no consistent market, why would I spend money on rent to put it someplace? So a lot of these things are going to have to work themselves out over time, I think. And I'm going to take that as a segue to go into Barbara's discussion on the workshop that's coming this fall, because I think a lot of those questions are going to be hammered out there, and we'll at least know the questions that we need to answer a little bit better. But I think the main takeaway for me is like, we just need to continue the conversation. Oh, you're right. I can't count, Leah. It's the May 15th for the microgrant. Sorry. Well, we need to continue the conversation. And as we're moving and starting to build momentum, making sure that other people know that so that they can get on the bandwagon. So
I just wanted to jump in really quick too. That's exactly what our summit, you know, that's exactly how you summarized it there, Janice, was perfect. And so at least we know that there are a lot of people from the commercial end, the designer and owner end that are also trying to make that reality.
okay, Barbara, please.
Yeah, so it's really exciting to have this focus and build on all of the work that was done at the workshop that Kristen talked about and everywhere else. And many, if not all of you, will get an invitation to answer a survey and possibly some interviews, or like as we prepare. We have a good sense based on all this work of like where the gaps are and what needs to happen. But with my foggy brain, the objective of the workshop is to really hone in on what is it that DEP can actually do themselves through policy, through education, through outreach, through the various tools that DEP has at its disposal, incentives, grants, etc. What can DEP influence, not own, but influence, and what is needed from the private sector related to, you know, what's the relationship between what the private sector can do and what DEP can do through its various tools. So the plan is the plan is to have a day-ish long workshop in, well, we have some dates. We need to make sure that there's a venue available, and then we'll finalize the dates. And we're gonna do our outreach, as I mentioned, surveys to include people who are outside of Massachusetts so that we can continue to benefit from anyone who's, had experience with things that we do not yet have nailed down here, and learn from their lessons. And then leave the workshop with very clear, actionable things that that DEP will own, and that us as a community across Massachusetts can own to support this, accelerating this moving forward. Anything else that you wanted me to?
Sorry, Kathy just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that you were hired as the facilitator for the workshop, which, don't worry, I always forget to introduce myself. By the way, I'm Janice Pare. I work for the Muni branch. But Barbara, we put out an RFP, or it was an RFQ, whatever, for this for this webinar or workshop. We were looking for a facilitator that had, a breadth of knowledge in this space, and who could help us sort of map out exactly actually what Barbara just said, map out where we are, where we want to go, and all of the pieces in between, and figure out what we can do together. So
yeah, and this is for anyone, there's some of you for sure who were part of it. If you remember the low carbon concrete workshop that we did with CLF locally, very similar, except not 18 months long with multiple workshops. Much more streamlined, but the same kind of thing. We're trying to actually focus on solutions and what we can practically do to accelerate the transformation of decon as to make it business as usual and really reduce the waste.
anybody else? Go ahead.
We actually have one, I don't think it was mentioned, one other question in the chat. Olivia shared a link, a resource for entities that provide trainings, which I'll put in the chat. And she asks, Olivia's curious how unions and trades are being engaged with this work. And I know that we have some on our deconstruction work group contact list. We've got a whole list of different folks that we reach out to in this group whenever we have a meeting. We'll share resources that way. That's probably how most of you heard about this meeting. But that's definitely something we're continuing to think about. And I don't know if you have anything to add, Janice, and it looks like Kathy might be typing in an answer too, but.
I'll wait for her to finish.
But definitely folks we want to engage with this work. And many of them showed up to our last deconstruction meeting, which was all about workforce development. And we really made a concerted effort to try and get those folks in the room for that.
Oh, Kathy said, important addition for our plan. Thank you. I was thinking the same thing. I don't think we had talked about trades, certainly not unions. So another stakeholder group to add to our list.
And I just put the build reuse link in the chat. Thanks for sending that, Olivia.
Leah, do you have the link to the listserv?
I can get it. Just some reminders. Move past that. We have a couple grant deadlines coming up. As Janice mentioned, we have our reduce, reuse, repair micro grants. They're due in a couple of days. So if you're thinking about applying, definitely get your applications in by 5 p.m. on May 15th. We also have our sustainable materials recovery program, which we talked about. Those are due June 2nd. We've got our new innovations grant, July 15th. Kathy put a link to that in the chat. And then our reuse and recycling business development grant, which is TBD for later this year. And if you want to connect with us, here's our emails. Again, you can find other previous meeting recordings and slide decks on our website, and we'll share all this good stuff in our follow-up email to all of you. Thanks for being here.